I remember, again, with your podcast, Patch was talking about the Monster Offwidth, and I guess it just shows how it is being in when you're climbing together, because I don't remember him on that pitch really at all.
I didn't realise how grim Offwidth climbing actually is if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because he tells it
like he was going to die.
He's going to die, and you just think this is hilarious.
So frightening, it was unbelievable. And all I could hear was, Patch, you're gonna die. Bailing down.
He probably thought it was hilarious when I dropped the cam and was facing me. He was probably like, oh, I can imagine him laughing.
I'm on the brink of tears, like thinking this is game over, and half the crag are in fits of laughter.
This episode, we join our third musketeer. The third of the trio with Leo and Patch is Ben Bransby. I've split this episode into two parts because with Leo and Patch, they're really coming-of-age stories. And in Ben's, he very much does come of age. And the second episode explores the results of that. In this first episode, we're going to follow him and Patch, and then later Jvan Tresch, on Freerider. So when Patch and Ben did Freerider, they frigged a little bit of it. Ben was left pretty unsatisfied, really. And he had some unfinished business that he wanted to settle a few years later. I first came across Ben in the back pages of On the Edge, with pink, green or red hair and skate shoes, and he was part of the competition scene. It wasn't long before he was on the front covers. I always had this idea of Patch as this mentally solid character who put himself in dangerous positions and just got on with it. Leo seemed a little bit more renegade, and that's how Patch painted him. While he and Ben were off climbing routes in Yosemite, Leo was making contacts and partying. And his appetite for risk was an outward expression of who he was, not some internal battle to be resolved. It's funny how your vantage point colours your judgments about others. Bransby always struck me as the more methodical of the three, despite the hair, the baggy trousers, and the run-ins with his coaches in the competition days. If you speak to anyone who's seen Ben climb, they'll describe him as the ultimate technician, strong and smooth with a perfect understanding of his balance. Just mention his name and people will tell you this unprovoked. It's hardly surprising given that Ben started so young, with climbing parents. You're listening to Factor 2 from UK Climbing.
Climbing seemed quite rock and roll back then. The whole scene was just pretty, maybe not inspiring, but the whole scene was just kind of like crazy to a 9, 10, 11-year-old kid. You were just like, wow, this is amazing. These guys, I'm seeing in magazines or I'm hanging out with down the wall who've got multicoloured dyed hair and lycra tights on, and it's a pretty cool scene. It was like, and you'd see your rock stars in the magazine, like your Andy Pollitz, and then the lads. We were in, my dad was in the Harrogate Climbing Club, and there were, some of the younger lads on that who had long hair and good tights and the luminous shore bags were just like, to me, they were like the rock stars in the magazine. They were pretty wild characters. And then, you go to school and it's a bunch of 8-year-old lads who play football, but then on your evenings and your weekends, you're kind of hanging out with these 20-year-old kind of dudes. But so people like Ben, Ben and Jerry obviously were in the mags a lot back then. And it was weird, I did very little sport climbing, and I was mostly a trad climber, but it was probably someone like Ben or Jerry who made that biggest impression on me as a young lad in the magazines. I think it was on a Tuesday night in winter, we used to go down Guys Who All, as part of the climbing club. And I was pretty much the only kid, who went there back then. I think there was one other lad, a young lad called Eddie. Never knew what happened to him. He was like a year younger than me. But other than that, it was all older people. But I climbed with my dad a lot. I climbed. My mum stopped climbing when I was born, but she had been a climber, and my dad was still a keen climber. So I climbed with him a lot, and people his age. But yeah, the guys that a little bit younger were the people who I kind of looked up to in a way that those guys cool. I'd got really keen when I was probably 9. So in those early years up to 9, I was climbing, a reasonable amount. Like I said, I did multi-pitch route when I was 5 or 6 and stuff. But when I was 9, I got really keen. And then by the time I was 11, I'd had, a few years of climbing a lot. And we lived in a place called North Rigton, which is it's kind of 2 villages below Armscliffe, but it's the one in kind of more to the north. But, I could run up to Armscliffe after school. I used to time it. I think it took me 7 minutes to run to Armscliffe from my house. So, I was climbing loads and loads. By the time I was 11, I'd done a lot of, I'd covered a lot of ground, not on the sharp end, but I'd seconded a lot, I'd bouldered a lot. I guess being an only child, and with a mum who was kind, she would come and belay me. So I'd often have days either in midweek or in the summer when my dad was working and people around, and by then I was leading, and she would just come and belay me, and I'd do 15 routes, and then just either abseil down or second them to strip the gear. So I got a huge amount of leading. So in that first year, I went from leading VSs, and then I was leading E2 by the end of that year. It's funny now when I look at all the young kids coming through who are at such a phenomenal level compared with me. But I think at that time with the people who ended up being kind of the guys I climbed with, so like Leo, like Patch, like Pete Robbins, like Kath, I think I had a higher physical ability. I had more stamina for sure, maybe a bit more strength. They were often a bit bouldering. They were, we were all pretty close, but I tended to just have to be with that kind of edge on them physically from having done from doing the comps a bit more than they did. Partly because when we moved down south near Bristol, there was a lot less local climbing. So I used to go to the climbing wall a lot. The nearest climbing was in Bristol, both in the Avon Gorge, but also in the climbing wall there. So, I was mad keen to climb anywhere. So we went to the wall, in winter particularly. And I just did a lot of mileage. Well, someone like Pete, who lived up here in Sheffield, he probably went to the wall less because he had Gritstone right here. I was never super motivated for the comps. I always had various little runs in with like the team management who not taking it seriously and dressing up and doing silly things. But it did give you a bit of a focus over the winter, particularly to just stay that little bit fitter. And it was, as I got a bit older and into the senior category, you definitely knew your place. You'd go to an international comp against, Francois Legrand, and, they were the guys at the time, Arnaud Petit, people like that. And we were just, we were nowhere essentially. So rather than being, at the top of your little local pack thinking, oh, I'm quite good, you'd go to a comp like that and you'd just be like, yeah, no, I'm nowhere near the physical standard these people are at. And that can give you that little kick, that little boost, and you're like, wow, if I was climbing as well as Francois Legrand, I think what I could do on the trad. Yeah, you're placing in the world a bit more. And, when people, I don't know, joked about foreigners coming over and finding gritstone easy, this gritstone's really hard, it's really bold. And then, some French climber comes over and cruised a lot of stuff. And it was like, well, yeah, these guys are, awesome, these Euros. The ones you bump into, it's like, they can climb, they can really climb. So it's not really a surprise when, they go to El Cap and do stuff, or they come over here and do hard trad. I think I definitely didn't have any disillusionment that, the British were the best climbers in the world, apart from Jerry. I'd met Leo when I was young. Obviously, I met Leo first in the comps, which was what was maybe one of the nice things about the comps at that point, when there was such a small scene of young climbers. It was a way to actually meet people. So I met people like, Adam Hocking, Adam Just at the time, Leo. There was a bunch of people. But me and Leo had been on holiday. Where did we go? We went to Mallorca when we were doing GCSEs. I think we were doing them in a slightly different way. I think I was actually still aiming to do them, and Leo was basically going to drop out as soon as he did them. But we went on holiday to Mallorca together, mostly sport climbing, although we did tried to do some new routing on trad. But yeah, so I knew Leo a little bit. I think similar to what Patch was saying. It was when he'd finished his A-levels, so before he went to uni, I think we had it just so happened we were both the same, all three of us the same age. Yeah, and I flew out on my own, so I wasn't, I didn't go on a trip to meet Leo and Patch. Went out on my own, got a Greyhound bus in Yosemite. First route, I think I did a route with Ian Parnell went and did a regular route with Half Dome, did a few things, but yeah, obviously knowing Leo already and then bumping into Patch there, we were hanging out a fair bit and doing stuff. I remember when you did the podcast with Patch recently, he was mentioning how, me and him went and did loads of kind of routes together while Leo was hanging out, and I kind of remember it as, I guess it's just remembering, you remember your own little way of things, don't you? I remember him and Leo both hanging out all the time. Well, I went off and did loads of routes with other people. You know, I think I did like a rostrum with a guy, Platinum Rob Miller, went and did that, and you know, did a few other things. Yeah, like I say, Half Dome. Maybe me and Patch did do a few routes. He's probably right. But then me and a guy, Mark Reeves, went and did Salathe. So we just set out to do it as an aid climb. So, you know, Patch was kind of saying how when him and Leo got on El Nino, you know, he'd just done Freerider, so he was kind of the one saying, well, I vaguely know how to haul, I vaguely know how to do this stuff, you know, I've done it once before. And I guess when me and Patch got on Freerider, I'd just done Salathe as an aid climb, so I had a vague idea. But, you know, when you get to the top of that first pitch, so I led the first pitch, and I got to the top and I was like, right, I need to haul. And obviously being 18, you know, I hadn't thought it'd be a good idea to practice hauling beforehand or practice jumarring. I was just like, well, I'll just get to Kabila and work it out. So I got to Kabila and kind of, you know, worked out how to haul and hold the bag. And Mark seconded, you know, jumarred up that pitch and stripped it. And I said to Mark, oh, do you want to lead this next pitch? And he was like, no, you lead this one. I'm just getting settled in. So I led that next pitch, hauled it, and he seconded it. And I was like, do you want to lead this pitch? He's like, no. So basically, it was brilliant. I led every pitch on Salathe, just doing it as an aid climb, but, you know, led every pitch, hauled it all, and we spent a couple of nights on it. And then I got to the last pitch, which was like, I don't know, like a 5/8 little scramble. I said to Mark, do you want to lead this pitch? And he was like, yeah, okay. So he got to lead the last pitch. But that was obviously brilliant. Doing a route on El Cap in any style as a climb. Particularly, I didn't have big dreams of El Cap before I got there, but as soon as you come into that valley, you know, as soon as you, like I say, I arrived on the Greyhound, and you're just looking out those windows, and you know, El Cap and on one side, Sentinel on the other, and Half Dome at the top of the valley. You know, it's just, you know, pretty for an 18-year-old who had spent most of my time climbing the UK. It was quite mind blowing to see the size of those walls, and they're just so accessible. You know, they're right there. You know, you see big walls in the Alps. You know, I'd skied in the Alps or climbed in the Alps, but they're always a bit of a distance, so you don't it's not so immediate. Whereas there, you're sat on the bus and it's just rising out right above you.
So the part of Patch's story that didn't quite add up for me was that they were teenagers and they'd met the Huber brothers in the Yosemite Valley who'd encouraged them to go and try Freerider. And the Hubers said, well, maybe ab in, check out some of the hardest sections, and then you could work out the logistics to go for it. Bearing in mind, Patch had never done a big wall at this point, and Ben had just done the one. I find it amazing that they started at the bottom, with all their kit, and just went for it. Ben's version of this is a little bit different, though. Rather than being these protective fatherly figures, he thinks the Hubers had a slightly different motive.
Technically, they hadn't actually done Freerider when we set off on it. So they hadn't actually led the route. Alex had led the individual pitches rope solo when he'd abseiled into them to working Salathe. So I think he might have been slightly concerned that we were actually going to do it. And it's a kind of a weird thing, what you call a first ascent. You know, he'd led all the new pitches on Freerider, but he hadn't actually led it from the bottom to the top, so maybe he was trying to delay us a little bit. But they'd been prepping it. But yeah, you know, I think that's maybe being a bit unfair to them, because they were really, really friendly to us, and we were hanging out with them along the boulders and bouldering together. Although they tended to not do the Boulder Problems because they were like, we can't afford to break our ankles. You know, if we break our ankles, we get no money. And Leo in particular obviously was just jumping around, you know, like an idiot. We just set off on it. You know, I don't know if it was that we were overconfident as 18-year-olds, but I'd always just gone climbing, you know, and I'd tried hard stuff in the past, and it wasn't that I'd be like, oh, you know, I can onto that E7, I can do that route. I wasn't scared to set off on stuff. I think I was confident in my ability that I wasn't going to get into trouble. And that, you know, I often failed on routes, but, you know, I was happy to kind of make those decisions as I went. So I could get on a hard route, a hard, scary route, and I'd just, you know, I wasn't just committing like an idiot. You know, I'd assess it as I went. And it was kind of the same on Freerider, and particularly because I'd just done Salathe as an aid climb. I was like, well, you know, I'm not worried about getting stuck on the wall and not knowing how to get off. And we've got ropes, we can abseil down, we can, you know, we know how to do that stuff. And I guess I just wasn't concerned that it was going to, you know, be an epic. We weren't like, oh, yeah, we can piss it. But we were like, well, you know, what's the worst that can happen? we were like those typical 18-year-olds. You know, we were like pretty unprepared, hadn't packed properly. We'd taken a stove but no pans, so we had like tins of spaghetti and we were trying to heat them up in the tin. You know, so the bottom half would be burnt and the top half would be cold. And we'd only brought one tin to share for each night. So the food for a night was like a tin of like Monster spaghetti or Alphabetti spaghetti or whatever. And that was our evening meal. And we'd open the tin and then we'd take it in turns who had the cold half and who had the hot half. And we'd, you know, like Patch would be like, you've had more than half. Like, look at how many rings there are on the tin. And he'd be like, oh, but, you know, the top half is a bit of air. You know, it's all sunk to the bottom. Oh. And, you know, next day it would be the other way around. And he'd be like, oh, you've had more than me. You know, we're having all these little arguments. Like, only like light-hearted one, but we're like, and yeah, you know, dropping stuff and, you know, who slept where on the ledges. Because we didn't have portal ledge, we were just sleeping on the crag. Oh, you had a better night's sleep than me. And I remember, again, with your podcast, Patch was talking about the Monster Offwidth, and I guess it just shows how it is being when you're climbing together, because I don't remember him on that pitch really at all. But I'd led the pitch before, and we'd got this really bad beater off, I think it was off Dean Potter, who'd said you could climb direct into the Monster Offwidth, which was easier, and it meant you had about 40 or 50 foot extra kind of off-width to do. And it missed out this 512 bit of face climbing. Now, we could piss 512 face climbing, but for some reason we were like, oh yeah, Dean, that sounds great. We'll do that variation. So it was me who set off on the Monster. So I started leading it, and I led it. I think it was Camelot 4. So again, when Patch was talking about the cams, we had a Camelot 4 and a Camelot 5. I think the sizing has changed slightly, but the Camelot 4 I think is you know, a bit bigger than the Friend 4. And we, you know, that went in first, so that was kind of fist size, and the crack got a bit wider, and I didn't really know what to do, but I had this bigger Camelot, and I was pushing that up in front of me, and I was essentially laybacking it because I couldn't really off-width climb. I'd done a little bit in the UK, but I didn't really know what I was doing, so I was kind of laybacking, and I was pushing this cam up, and then I'd rest on the cam because I was getting tired, and I'd push it up a bit higher while climbing, and I'd taken a couple of rests. And I was now on the bit which is where the normal Monster kind of comes in. And I remember I was laybacking it, pushing this cam, and I was really close to these big flakes, and then suddenly the cam spun sideways because the crack got a bit wider, and it just dropped down the rope. So it slid away from me because I hadn't clipped it to my harness. So I'd just been pushing it in front of me, but it was clipped to the rope, like a normal runner. So it span sideways and it just dropped down the rope. And I looked down, it was, I'm not sure how far it was to Camelot 4, but it felt like it was 60 foot or something to Camelot 4. You know, I was like, oh my God. And I looked up and these flakes were about 5 foot away, and I was like, well, I'll just go for those, you know, I'll just lay back up and get to those flakes. So I just lay back up and I got to these flakes. And I guess partly because I'd lost the cam by this point, but also I was just like, right, I'm not going any higher. I'm just going to belay where I am. So, and I made this belay on these flakes. I think it was maybe a bolt as well, but anyway, I set up a belay and I started hauling the bags, and Patch started jumarring up. And then I noticed as he was jumarring, a block that I'd tied him off to started coming out of the crack. So I stopped hauling the bag and I kind of held this block in place while Patch jumarred up to me. And then he obviously brought the cam with him, the big cam which had fallen out. So he again put the cam in up above because it fitted above the blocks, and we kind of re-belayed and finished hauling. So, and then I just remember him leading his pitch and finding it, you know, I don't know how he found it, I can't remember it. But again, in his story, you know, he's going on about his pitch and how scared he was. And, you know, to me at the time, I was just, I was terrified after my pitch, and I'm just belaying Patch. And stuff. But I remember, you know, we did things as well, like the Hoovers would put all these bits of finger tape on the crag, because they were doing it in a day, so they were getting ready to do it in a day. They actually overtook us on their one-day ascent, which I think was maybe the first proper ascent of it, I don't know. But anyway, they overtook us doing it in a day, but they'd put all these bits of finger tape on the cracks and written the cam size that would go in next to the finger tape. So a bit like a tick mark, but you'd write like cam 2, and there'd be a bit of tape with cam 2 on it, and that'd be where they'd place the cam 2. So me and Patch were just like moving these bits of tape. We'd like, every time we came across a bit of tape, we'd peel it off the wall and just kind of either move it or just like scrunch it up and chuck it away. So we were trying to like, you know, sabotage all of their ascents, but kind of meant nicely. We weren't like, oh, we want them to fail. We were just like, oh, let's move these. And we were just like, we're just basically having a pretty good time until we basically ran out of food. So we ran out of food like just below the top. And and we ended up jumarring up like the last 4 pitches. I think we just jumared up the Hoobers fixed ropes, because we had fixed ropes and left sleeping bags kind of not halfway, like 4 or 5 pitches down for if they failed to do it in a day. And they'd just overtaken us, and they said to us, "Oh, if you want to jumar our ropes, it's okay, but you must carry all our stuff." So we ended up carrying all of their like sleeping bags and all their fixed ropes, and just jumaring up the last kind of 4 or 5 pitches to the top. Well, not so much doing it a day. I think what plan in mind then was doing it, because we hadn't done the route. We'd done, probably some of the hardest pitches like the Boulder Problem and the 2 corners up to the roof. I think we both led all of the pitches above 512, apart from the Monster, and apart from maybe 1 or 2 near the top that we'd jumared past. So we'd basically both led the majority of the hard pitches, but obviously we hadn't done it. We were still quite a way off doing it. So yeah, I wanted to just go and do the route. I think it was when I'd finished uni, so I went back. Patch and Leo continued on their adventures, and I went back. I did have my year out, but I went to uni. I ended up going to uni with Patch, so he joined us. Maybe actually, yeah. I mean, he must have just had 1 year out as well, because he joined me in my first year. We were in a house in Leeds with Patch and a few other people. So it was when I finished uni, I headed back out to Yosemite, and I went along with a Swiss lad who'd come and stayed on our sofa for about 6 months, guy Jvan Tresch, who was a really good climber, and Jason Pickles. So we went out. Really, when we got to Yosemite, game was to just try and do Freerider. So Ivan and Jason were kind of looking at it, and Ivan was probably the stronger of the two. So he ended up basically leading, I think, pretty much everything, and I was just like, look, I'm just going to lead the pitches I've not led before, and I'm whatever on the other ones, I'll second them, I'll jumar them. I'm not so concerned. And did that, which I kind of got to the top. I was going, oh yeah, I've done Freerider, but then I'd only actually, on that visit, I'd probably only climbed like 6 pitches. But I was like, I did the 6 pitches I hadn't done. So I was kind of like, well, I've done all the pitches. But it did. I guess it didn't kind of sit quite right with me. And also we were, I guess, just got inspired to do it in a day.
There's a key reason why I love this next part of the story. If you listen to the second episode with Duncan Critchley, 9.5 hours, you'll see how similar the two of them are.
So we decided that we would set out at first light. We took Danish pastries as our performance fuel for the day, and climbed it in tracksuit trousers and t-shirts.
Ben's motivation and what he loves about this adventure is just the idea that it's just the disrespect for El Capitan. You're going to show up at the bottom and you're just going to go for it. You'll have a big day at the crag. For Ben and Ivan, this was exactly the same.
So we went up it twice, and the second time we went up it, we left a little bit of food and water in a couple of places. Although we left it in brown paper bags, and it turned out all the ravens just ate it all. So we didn't actually have any food on it. But yeah, we stashed a bit of food and kind of practiced the pitches a bit more. But, not overly. We just kind of climbed it in like 3 or 4 days or whatever. Yeah, and then we decided to go for it. We had a bit of a run-in with the law before so we were kind of getting ready to go for it, and being, I guess I wasn't as young, but still being stupid, we managed to get caught shoplifting, me and Ivan. We were stealing knee bandages to protect our knees for the Offwidth, and got caught. So we went to the jail in Yosemite and got bailed out. And we had to go back. So we got bailed out on like a Saturday morning. I can't remember. Anyway, we got bailed out just at the start of a weekend, and the judge was obviously off for the weekend until Monday. So we had to go back to court on Monday to get our sentencing. And we were worried that we might, get put in jail, or we might get chucked out of the valley or something like that. So we were like, oh, we have to do Freerider. We'll have to do it tomorrow, because otherwise, we might not be here. So we just, got up early and set off on it. Can't remember who bailed us out. It might have been Jason's girlfriend. It was someone. We didn't have enough money to bail our own bond. We just set off on it, and it was amazing. It was amazing. So a few people had done it in a day by that point. So the Hoobers did it. They overtook me and Patch on it. And I think by this point, maybe 4 or 5 people had done it in a day. In mixed techniques, I think the Hoobers had done it team free, so leading and seconding, but everyone else I think had done it where one person would lead the whole route, and they'd have kind of a supporting person along who would jumar up maybe carry a bag and a bit of water and stuff. But we were like, well, we don't want to do it like that. We both want to do it, but also we want to treat it just like you would do climbing in the UK. Like you would do just on a normal multi-pitch route. So we'll turn up at the bottom and I'll lead the first pitch and you can second it, and then you lead the next pitch and I'll second it. And we just wanted to do it like that. I think we had a jumper on, which we, in the heat of the day, we tied around our waist. Head touches clipped to the back of your harness. We had a tiny rack of gear. I think we had 8 cams and 8 quick draws. It didn't seem totally casual. We were like, this is, it's going to be quite a big deal. But I don't remember any doubts. And again, I don't think that was because I was like, oh, we are going to do it. But I don't think we were worried or cared. We were just like, well, we'll just go for it and see. And yeah, we didn't take much. Like I say, we just had a jumper on at the start. We did start pretty early. We started in the dark, so like, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning, something like that. Yeah, didn't even take trainers, so we ended up walking down in our rock boots. I think me and Patch had like found food and eaten it when we'd been on Freerider, because we were running out of food. And people often do, if they've got a bit more food or water, they'll often leave it on the wall, I guess, partly selfishly not to have to haul it up, but partly kind of like, well, if someone else arrives here, they'll be able to use our water and food. So me and Patch had like found food and tried to eat it. So me and Ivan, we got to pretty much the end of Free Blast. Is it Heart Ledge or Mammoth Terrace? One of those where we'd stashed for our breakfast, and it was like bagels and avocado. It was really nice stuff. And we got there and it was all gone, and we were like, we were really pissed off. We were like, bastard, some climbers have eaten our food, and we hunted around. We found this tin of food and some boulders, and it had that kind of self-opening. It was a tin of fish, one of those tins, but it had one of those kind of pull-off tops. And we pulled it off, and I think it was sardines or something like that. And we weren't a big fish fan. I don't know how long these sardines had been like stashed under this boulder on this ledge, but we opened these sardines and started trying to eat them with like our fingers at 7 in the morning. We were pretty upset with the food gone because, it was a big day for us, for sure. It's one of the biggest, hardest, longest, whatever days I feel like I've had. Definitely of hard climbing. So we were, with the lack of food, we were starting to get a bit concerned. We pushed on, we got to El Cap Spire. So by then we knew how to off-whip. So, and the good thing with Ivan was I'd got quite good at cracks, or better at cracks, whereas he was from Switzerland. So he had bouldered like Fontaine B, which back then was really, really hard. So he was amazingly strong. But when we turned up in Yosemite, he couldn't hand jam. We'd taught him how to hand jam. So, he was doing amazingly well, but he was kind of like, oh, well, you lead the harder cracks, and he would lead things like a Boulder Problem pitch. So I led the Monster, but, at the same time, I probably had the slightly easier deal. I was leading like these 5.8, we'll go 5.8 chimneys I would lead, and then it'd get to like a 5.12 Boulder Problem pitch, and he'd lead it. And I'd be like, just keep it tight while I'm seconding Ivan. Not too tight, I don't want to cheat, but, nice, keep it snug. But so we got to El Cap Spire, which is where we'd stashed lunch, and all the lunch had gone. And at that point, we were like, I think we maybe saw some of the paper fluttering around, and we were like, oh, it's birds which have been eating it. But again, I think partly because we didn't have many clothes and because we hadn't eaten, like when we stopped, we were just getting cold and getting feeling worse. So we basically didn't stop. So we didn't really stop on the spire. We didn't have any food to eat anyway. So we just carried on, and we got through the Boulder Problem okay, and we got to the Enduro Corners, and that was meant to be Ivan's, one of his big leads, but he fell off the top hardest corner pitch. He fell off, and he had to navigate, and he fell off, and he was like Ben. He swore a lot. Well, he was like, Ben, I'm fucked. He was like, yeah, I'm ready to fuck. You'll have to do it. So he handed the ropes over to me, and I was like, right, I've got. We were both tired. It was like pitch, I don't know, 20 whatever. And I was like, right, I've basically got one chance at this. I'm just going to have to just utterly go for it on this pitch. And I knew, the start's really hard. But there were a couple of like in situ copperheads or whatever, or maybe Ivan's gear, even a kid put a couple of pieces in and probably hadn't stripped them out. And I was like, right, where's that gear there? And then I know there's a good hand jam and a good cam basically halfway up the rest of the pitch. So I just climbed flat out to that one cam. I didn't place any more gear until I got to that cam. Still got to that hand jam where I placed that kind of one cam. And then I looked up and it was like, 40 foot to the belay, and I was like, right, well, I'm not going to place any more gear. And I think I'd maybe even left all the, what gear we had, I'd left it with Ivan on the belay. I was just like, right, I've only got like 2 quick draws left. I'm just going for the belay. And I just went for the belay and got there. And I was just, it felt like when we did that pitch, we were like, I think we're probably in. And Ivan seconded it clean. And we got around the corner and it was kind of suddenly in the shade and we were really cold and tired. And we were kind of cuddling each other to try and keep warm. But then we found this Nalgene bottle, which was from Platinum Rob had left it because he'd done it in that guy I did the rostrum with kind of back in 98 had just done Freerider in a day. And he'd left a Nalgene full of fig Newtons. So obviously, being sensible, he'd put in some of the birds coming. So we found this Nalgene, we opened it, we ate, shared out these fig Newtons, and then we had like four pitches to the top, where you basically knew you were in by that point. You were like, yeah, this is, and it was still light, so we were going up those pitches, which are kind of on the edge of the Salathe Headwall. They're just to its left, but they're just, talking about the exposure, it's amazing exposure, brilliant climbing. And you're just going up those pitches, and you're tired, but you're kind of like, I'm pretty sure we've got this, and this is just, it's amazing. The sun's starting to set, we can still see, we're going to do it, and that was awesome to climb El Cap like that, like it's a route. Like it's just like a day route, without a little haul bag, without, water on your hand, just turning up. It was, we'd done the prep and we'd stashed the food we'd got eaten, but, it felt like you were just a big day cragging. And those big days cragging go, to free climb on El Cap is amazing.
So in Leo's episode, I guess I was wondering, where do you go from there when they'd done El Nino? And in Ben's case, he was obviously wondering the same thing. After doing Freerider in a day, what's next? The answer seemed pretty obvious.
We were doing so many kind of long routes. We were really fast, really efficient. And something like Astroman was just like a little afternoon stroll at that point. And we were like, this is brilliant. But we were also kind of like, well, what's the next step with this fitness and this confidence we've got? Me and Ivan were just like, right, let's go to Patagonia.
Join us next time on Factor 2 from UK Climbing. I'm Will Treasure. Thanks for listening.
Felt like you were just a big day cragging, and those big days cragging go, to free climb on El Cap is amazing.
And I was sat there in my tracksuit trousers and t-shirts, like I was doing a 2 or 3 pitch route on Gogolf, and it just felt absolutely amazing.